Okay, we're rolling.
A briefing room, both in that were posted that I took out.
Okay. Well, we'll hold that up later in
Yeah, okay.
in the video.
I
Okay.
don't know, but too close.
No, that's fine.
All right, this is an interview at the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society, Buffalo, New York. It's approximately 12:40 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russett and Wayne Clark. It is the 23rd of
August.
August, 2006.
Is there
All right.
a cap on or?
That's fine.
Okay.
Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth,
Sure.
please?
Lawrence Paul Jr. I was born in Buffalo, January 21st, 1925.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I had 2 years of college. That's as far as I got.
Okay. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, that was an interesting situation. We went to a matinee movie theater, back the Victoria Theater to be exact, on West Ferry Street at Grand Street. And we came out there, extra, read all about it. At that time, it was long before television and the internet and all that sort of thing. So when there was any big news, they sold an extra edition to the paper. And they were yelling, "Pearl Harbor bound." So what the heck is Pearl Harbor? And the story goes on from there. But
How did you feel when you heard about this?
Well, naturally, I guess it had probably mixed this feelings. I was 16 years old at the time, and I didn't feel the need of, or that I would have to be going into the service real quickly. At that time, you had to be 21 before they would draft you. And it was just an overwhelming news report, and needless to say, and to find out that most of our Pacific coast, or Pacific Navy is almost sunk. Quite a disaster, really, when you think of it.
Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
Okay. Why?
Well, I knew my drafting number was coming up, and I rather choose to where I wanted to be. And I decided, through research and so forth, that I wanted to go in the Air Force. And I left Buffalo and I went right into the cadet program, the aviation cadet program. I actually volunteered for induction, is the way it worked. And I went right from Buffalo to Nashville, Tennessee, which is the area where they put you through a lot of exams, both physically and written exams, to find out what your qualifications were, what your desires were. And it was really a placement depot. And I asked for pilot school, and I did receive pilot school. So I went from Nashville right into the cadet program in the Southeastern Training Command.
Where was that?
18 months and 18 years and 2 months old. Nashville, Tennessee was, as I say, where they examined you and going through all of the qualifications. And then I did get to receive pilot training. So I went to Maxwell, Alabama. There was, at that time it was referred to the Air University of the Air Force in Montgomery, Alabama. And that's where we took our preliminary pre-flight school.
How long was that school?
Pardon me?
How long was that school?
That was only 2 months. All the different stages were about 2 months. You went to basic flying for 2 months, and you graduated from there. I mean, a pre-flight. You graduated from there. You went to primary, which is the first exposure. I had never been up in an airplane before to that point. And in fact, my first plane ride was with an instructor. And I did like it very much. And I felt very comfortable, really. I went down to Avon Park, Florida, after the Montgomery experience at the pre-flight school. And that was where we had our bush pilots were our trainers. This fellow here At that time, he must have been about 65 years old, and old, what they call bush pilots. They used to fly mail around, and what little freight there was at that time and so forth. But he could do just about anything with an airplane that you can imagine. Excellent instructor.
What type of airplane was it?
It was just this biplane,
Stearman?
Sturman, you're right, PT-17 Sturman.
Okay.
And great airplane. I enjoyed flying that airplane probably more than anything else because you really flew it by the seat of your pants. And at that school, we learned quite a bit about flying. Right from how to stall and spin the plane and recover, to acrobatics, and spot landings, and all of those different areas. If there's any question that you weren't going to make it, you'd have a check flight to see whether you could go on from there.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I was able to go right through the whole thing. Let's see, I sold about 5.5 hours of flying time, which is about the minimum that you could have. Then from there, I went to Cochran Field, Georgia for basic training. And that was a transition into a little bigger aircraft. It was still single engine. I forget how powerful our engine was. I think it was 220 horsepower. But you learn how to use flaps, and it had a two-position propeller, and just a little bit bigger aircraft. Learn how to night fly. It was one of my worst experiences. Imagine coming into landing in the dark. All they had on the runway lights was what they call smudge pots. Nothing else, no other lights around. And that was pretty scary when you were just learning how to fly.
Mm-hmm.
But that was part of the phases of basic training. And did some acrobatics and, as I say, just learning how to handle a little bit larger aircraft. Then at the end of basic, they asked you whether you wanted to go to single engine or twin engine flying school, advanced flying school. And from what I had read and so forth, I said I'd like to go into multi-engine, twin engine. But basically for a couple of reasons. Number one, I like the idea of having a crew with me. If you're shot or anybody else is injured seriously, you got somebody else to help you out. The second reason was I thought you could develop some hours in a multi-engine plane that if you did decide to get into civilian aviation afterwards, that really counted a lot. And to go into fighter school, which I was tempted to do that because it's a little bit more fun, I guess you would say, more exciting, do a lot more acrobatics and that sort of thing. But I just had a hard time thinking about the fact that if I ever got injured up there, you could bleed to death and no one know the difference, that kind of thing. So I did go into advanced flying school, twin engine school, at Valdosta, Georgia, Moody Air Force Base. And there again, that was another 2-month session. You learn how to handle the plane with retractable landing gears. You had twin engines to work with. The other instrumentation was a little more complicated. You got into navigation more thoroughly. That's probably you did some cross-country flights to get used to plotting, navigation, and that's basically what you did in flying school. And before you went out, they asked you what you'd like to do when you graduated. And right from day one, I wanted to be 17. I studied a lot about it, and it was very exciting to me, the size and the structure and so on and so forth. And so they put me into B-17. So I went to McDill Field in Tampa, Florida, which back at 60 years ago was Tampa was like a little town. And I think of the size of it, I think they had one hotel. And St. Petersburg was another little town. Now you get down, there's one huge metropolitan area, that whole peninsula practically. But until, that's where we picked up our crew. We signed all the crew positions. And being only 19 years old, I was destined to be a co-pilot at that point. And our first pilot was, he was an old man, 25 years old. And real nice fellow from California. A navigator, Warren Davidson, was from the Boston area. He was about 2 years older than I am. Our bombardier was Bernie White from Rochester, New York. And he was about 3 years older than I am. And we had all the rest of our crew too there. The B-17 had 10 crew people. 10 crew members. And a good bunch of guys. We all hit it off very good right from day one. And basically that's where I learned how to fly a B-17 in McDill Field. And we were there 3 months, I think, for this whole transition period. And I had to learn how to fly the B-17 well enough to take over completely should a pilot be injured or put out of commission for whatever reason. And then from there, let's see, we were sent to Hunter Field, Georgia, which is Savannah, Georgia. And we were to pick up our own B-17, that brand new B-17, and fly it to England. So that made it real exciting for all of us. We thought that was great. But we got up to Hunter Field, and they canceled our orders. We didn't know why. They sent us up to New Jersey, Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, to go across by ship. Well, we're about halfway out in the ocean. They finally told us that the D-Day was underway. And that's why they didn't want any other outside traffic coming into the Great Britain area, because it was such a huge operation. So after about 2 weeks of a nice cruise across the Atlantic Ocean with 5,000 other fellows on board, and
Now that was your entire crew aboard the ship?
or yes, plus we had there's about, I think there's 5,000 fellows that sit on the board at that time. And about 3,000 or 4,000 of them were all infantry ground personnel, and there's about the balance were Air Force. And basically, all we did was read or play cards, long flight, and long boat ride, I should say.
Now, were the officers kept separate from the enlisted?
We were put in like a room about half the size of this place. It was they call those things. I think the stateroom, but there was about 16 of us in one room, small room. And a heck of a lot better than the accommodations that the poor lizard guys had. They had a huge hole in the ship there with one on top of the other. They were packed in like sardines. We ate well, the food was excellent. How they had that much food on board for 2 weeks, I don't know, but they did. And we pulled into the English, Irish Sea, in between England and Ireland. And then we had this dock in front of the Liverpool Harbor for about 2 days. We never did find out why it took so long, but I guess they took a lot of time to roll off the red carpet for us, I guess. But about 2 years ago, I put all of my memories, so to speak, in this little pamphlet, or not pamphlets, it's about an 18-page booklet. I injured my arm a couple of years ago. I fell in my house, and I couldn't play golf, so I said, yeah, I think it's a good time to to maybe do a little research or updating on my memoirs from my family. I had 5 children, and so that's what I did with this, and I had to do a lot of research to refresh my memory as to what I did and where I was. Fortunately, I had actually a diary that I had kept. This is it right here, of all my missions, where they were, how much bomb load we had, how high what we flew, what our flag composition was, whether there was any planes down, and so forth. It's all right in here. And I put a lot of that in here. This is an interesting thing. I have this out too. I've never ever seen one of these silk maps. We carried these, the pilots carried these every mission, right in our flying suit, and they had different maps from which were different areas depending upon where your target was. This one here was the Pyrenees Mountains. That's between France and Spain. And the whole idea of these things were, well, they were kind of multi-purpose, really. You could use them as a bandage. They're silk. You could use it to carry something like a little sack. And the main purpose of them to begin with, if you had to bail out, you had a rough idea where you were, what part of the country you should have known. But this had all the towns, the main highways, and we had advanced information as to who to contact if we had to go down. We weren't allowed to write this stuff down because they didn't want anything to get back to the underground that are helping us, so, you know. And a lot of POWs, they did use these before they were captured. And a lot of them did get through and contacted the underground and were able to get to back to the Allied side again and get out from where they were. They were very unusual, very detailed, and very well done. I have another one of these framed in my office. My family gave it to me several years ago.
Now, where were you stationed in England?
My field was in Hempstead, which was about 35 miles north of London, about 15 miles south of Cambridge, and not Hempstead, it was just a little town that's really probably the size of, I can't think one around here that would be so small. But it was right, our field was right in the middle of a big farm field. In fact, there were wheat fields all over the place. We had right next to our compound, there was vegetable gardens that the farmers had previously had, and were, in fact, they were even using some of them still. I took some movie pictures over there too at the time, and they're really quite interesting to see the field and where it was laid. And back in 1990, my wife and I went back over there on an anniversary and right to our old air base, and they had some of these natives over there, they call them Friends of the 8th Air Force. They were fantastic. They showed us all over the place. And they just couldn't stop thanking us for all that we did to help them over there. They really were very, very, very friendly and very helpful in that regard.
Now, you had your own camera with you?
Yeah, I did.
How did you obtain the film?
My father sent over, at that time during the war, it was hard to get actually. In fact, I only got a little bit of color film, which is so much better than a black and white. But that's the way I did it.
When you went back, was there anything left of the field or barracks?
All there was is a little strip of the main runway that you could see. Everything else was, the old buildings were there. We had Nissen huts. We lived in the old Nissen hut. They were like a barrel cut in half,
Like a Quonset hut?
Well, it's like a Quonset hut.
Uh-huh.
And even our briefing room and so forth, was just a larger Quonset hut. And all of that stuff was gone. Like some of the old buildings that were particular squadron or navigation and briefing room and so forth, some of those places were still left, but they had been taken over by industry. And in fact, one of the people that took us around when we went back over there actually lived near the end of our active runway. And they would sit there, little kids watching us take off for a mission. They said it was really quite something to see. Let's see. The 8th Air Force the average person has no idea of the size of this thing, how big it was. There's about 350,000 men and women that went through the 8th Air Force altogether. Now I say went through it because I myself was a replacement crew. I wasn't one of the original crews that went over there. I went to replace somebody when they were finished with the 25th mission or the 30th mission. I had to fly 35 missions. As they got a little bit easier, they kept raising the amount of missions you had to fly. And but there was a huge, huge Air Force. It was the largest Air Force ever, and up to this day, there's anything that can touch it. We could put up 2,000 bombers in one day. 2,000. 1,000 B-17s, 1,000 B-24s, and 1,000 fighter planes, which mainly were our escort. When we first got over there, they couldn't go all the way into Germany, but when we came up with a new P-51, they had the big tanks on them. They flew us right into the middle of Germany. In fact, I'll tell you a story about this other map here in a minute. But we had more casualties in the 8th Air Force than the whole Navy combined all over the world. We had about 55,000, I think it was, total casualties, about half of which were death, about half of which were POWs.
Now, when was your first mission?
My first mission was August 3rd, 1944. And the last one was January 17th, 1945. So it took about 5 months.
What was your target in the first one, do you recall?
The first mission I do, yeah. It was the marshalling yards in Saarbrucken, Germany. Right kind of in the center, it's on the Rhine River, the lower part of the Rhine River. And see, the 8th Air Force was a strategic Air Force. We weren't out to destroy cities or destroy populations. We had specific targets. We had a bridge, we had ammunition, we had aircraft factories, roads, bridges, all that type of thing. That was our main. When we got over there, it was right after the landing in Normandy, and we were constantly trying to stop Hitler being able to get munitions and troops and armor and everything else to the front lines. We blow up bridges and roads and whatever we could do. And
Could you tell me what were your feelings on your first mission?
It's something you look out and you say, you start seeing this flag around and say, holy mackerel, somebody's trying to kill me. It's a strange feeling. And say, wow, this is really, going through flying school, they always said signs on, prepare for combat, prepare for combat. It was a real mental state that they were trying to get us used to so that we could build up to this. But it was scary. It really was. As I say, I think one of my claims to fame is I was one of the youngest B-17 pilots in the whole 8th Air Force. I finished my last mission 4 days before my 20th birthday. And one of the other fellows in the squadron was about 2 weeks younger than I am. He was down in the Stars and Stripes, the newspaper that they had over there. he was recognized as being the youngest. So I had to be very close to be one of the youngest
Mhm.
pilots in the whole Air Force. But I said the power that we had, probably the most famous mission I was on was one to Peenemünde, Germany, which was up on the Baltic Sea. Right? We had to go over Denmark. And our formation that day, I can almost picture it now, was rough. We figure it was almost 300 miles long. We flew in 12 plane squadron formations, and there was 4 squadrons in a group, and we had 12 groups in a division. We had 3 divisions in the 8th Air Force, so it was just one mass, one right after the other in the sky in front of that. And we all didn't go to the same target, of course. This one, every once in a while you'd see a whole group peel off for a specific target that they were assigned to. I think we had the furthest one that day, to Peenemünde. But the neat part of it was, that was where they developed the B-1 bomb and the B-2 bomb. And they were developing other things that we really didn't know at the time. But we did a number on them. I went there twice actually, and we pretty well destroyed the facilities. The funny part is, when I went home, and just a few years ago, I'd say like 15 years ago, I was on a walk with one of my neighbors, and his name was Larry too. His name was Larry Potts, as a matter of fact. And he said, "Oh, I was a mathematician in World War II." I said, "Yeah." He says, "You ever heard of the Manhattan Project?" I said, "I sure did." He said, "Well, I worked on the Manhattan Project. That's what they call the development of the atomic bomb, you probably know." And he said, "I worked on that Manhattan Project." He said, "But you know, this Peenemünde, they almost got the atomic bomb." And I said, I know very well where it was." I said, "I bombed it twice." And he said, "Well, you fellas must have done a job, because this was, well, it was in August when we bombed that. Now, this was almost 10 months, 11 months before the war ended. So how knows if Hitler ever had that atomic bomb before we did, God only knows where it would be today." So we feel, our group felt very strongly that we would have a real direct effect on the result of the war and getting the atomic bomb before Hitler did. So I think that was my most important mission.
What were some of your other targets that you flew?
Well, here's another one. This one here. This was an oil refinery, a synthetic oil refinery in Merseburg, Germany. Merseburg was just west of Leipzig, which is right in the middle of Germany. And at this part, this is the 21st of November, 1944. By this part of the war, Hitler's desperation for oil was unbelievable, because they had needed oil to fight the mechanical war, from planes to tanks to everything. So supposing the fighters, the anti-aircraft they had, like 200 anti-aircraft on this one target. Well, this solid line here is where the flight we took. We got our bombs away at Merseburg, and the flat, I say, you've heard the expression, you think you could walk on flat? Believe me, it was that intense. We left the target, and we saw some dog fighting out in front of us between, we couldn't tell who it was far, we were too far away, we just could see these planes zigzagging all over the sky. The sky was full of contrails, all over the place. One of these pups from the German Air Force, some FW-190s, went through one of these contrails and hit us dead on, right in front of us. I forget, we had about a dozen of us in formation at that time, and they took about 9 of them out right there. And in fact, if we didn't have oxygen masks on, I could have recognized one of the German pilots going by. That's how close we were. He's coming this way, we're going that way. Our speed of enclosure was about pretty close to 500 miles an hour. So they were throwing right through us before we could think about it. And they caught us all with our pants down as far as exchanging any fire with them. But fortunately, there were some P-51s in the area, and they got those guys the hell out of there real quick. And the few of us that were left, the 3 of us, the 2 P-51s picked us up, and they escorted us all the way back to England. God, if I ever wanted to kiss a man in my life, those are the ones I wanted to kiss. I was so happy to see these guys come along to pick us up. Because we never would have made it home, because they would have picked us off like I don't know what. So that was my first mission.
Did your plane ever receive much damage?
This day, I was just going to tell you, we got down the ground, we didn't know, both tires were shot out. We hit the ground, we had no idea what it is. Hit the ground at 100 miles an hour and had no rubber, no tires. We couldn't even taxi, we had to leave it right where we were. We counted 250 holes in the aircraft. And not one of us, the 10 fellows on there, had a scratch on us.
It's amazing.
I mean, I'm talking about faith. But that was the worst one by far. And this, I said, was in a briefing when I took it down and I finished and took it home and had it laminated.
Now, you mentioned in this form you sent in, your pilot was killed in one of the missions?
Yeah, there was another terrible situation. That was probably my worst day that I didn't fly. They were going to make our pilot, first pilot, they call him deputy lead. In the event, the lead plane on that squadron had to abort for any reason, whether it was mechanical or whether it was shot, the pilots, or whatever. They had to have a backup leader. So they were training my first pilot to be a backup squadron leader. And they pulled me off. They pulled our navigator off, and they pulled the bombardier off, and put in 3 more experienced people to fill those positions while we were training our first pilot. Well, they were all killed on takeoff. My whole crew, except for the 3 of us, the bombardier, navigator, and myself. They were leaving for a mission to Munich. The plane was loaded, 1,700 pounds of gas. The bomb load was all incendiary. They hit a moat at the end of our main runway, about a half a mile from the actual end of the runway. They went right into this moat. Everything went. The bombs, incendiary bombs, and I said the 1,700 gallons of 100 octane gas made one hell of an explosion. The 3 of us, my bombardier, navigator, and myself, we heard the runway was right from here to Delaware Park Lake, the other side of the lake where the house is over there, away from it. So we had a pretty good, but it was still dark. We didn't know who it was at the time. We just prayed that, oh God, our crew. You know, it took about 15 minutes, I think, before we got the news that it was our crew that were all killed. And the irony of it was, my pilot, he was from a pretty wealthy family. And before he had told us that on his 25th birthday, he was going to inherit $100,000 from his grandfather. And the first amount of that was going to be on his 25th birthday, which is the day he was killed. Mm-hmm. The last thing he said going out of the hut that morning, fellas, this is my lucky day. So last thing he said, he was killed. The day he went to the money. when we went back, my wife and I went back over there, they said in the 90s, we visited the bomb area once there where we struck where they crashed. It was right next to a church. And there was a house since built right next to it. It was like a big moat, which turned out to be a little bit of a pond. And that's what the site where they crashed. This is a book that one of the fellows in our group, Alan Orstrom, he did a study and put all of this, most of our missions, he wrote them up, all the details of them, and so forth. I included the Smurfberg mission in this report here. But he did a fantastic job. This was my picture when I was in primary training.
Now, when was that taken?
Ardennes Park. This was taken about
I got it.
May of 1943. And this was the hot shot. And it was dressed up. This was where our field was there. Yeah, this is the vegetable field right next to us I was talking about. We were going into London, so we were all dressed up and so forth. We wore those Eisenhower jackets that a lot of us did. I have a picture of my crew in here too.
Now, did you wear a flak jacket all the time?
And flying, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you, with your flight jacket, did you ever decorate it or paint it in any way?
A little bit. I did have at the back of it some artwork, a B-17 painted on it. I unfortunately gave it, I had one son and 4 daughters. I had let my son take it for the jacket, and by the time he got done with it, it was in shreds.
Oh,
So I should have.
Now, what was the name of your plane?
Stormy weather.
Now, why did you name it that?
Actually, it was already named.
Oh, weird.
Before us had it,
Mm-hmm.
and we just took it over. But I understand after we finished, it crash landed eventually in France by another crew.
Now, this model is painted the way your actual plane was painted. Let me hold it up.
yeah. Yeah, if you can tilt it too, so I can.
This was presented to me in 1993. Our bomb group, the 398 bomb group, we had a reunion every year. And that year we had it in Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I were a chair couple of it. A big affair. We had 500 there. We took over the whole Sheraton Hotel here on Walnut Avenue. And it was a 4-day, very exciting. We had 4 big banquets. The girls had a fashion show. We had dances. I think we had 15 or 20 buses that the different fellows and their wives could take going around Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and so forth. It was a big event. It was the biggest thing I've ever had to tackle, being chairman of that thing. The only thing we didn't have to do was the reservations for the hotel, kind of got for that. But we had to make all the other arrangements. It was a big job, but I had a wonderful committee. There was about 15 other fellows and their wives, and they worked very, very close.
Let me ask you something about your plane. Do you want to tell us what that W stood for on the tail?
Each bomb group had all attack triangle means that we were the 1st division of the 8th
Okay.
Air Force. One was a triangle, one was a square, and the other one was where's the 4th one? It's a circle. And I don't know what the W. I don't think it had any meaning for it, except that that's the way they identified each different ones.
Okay.
Each different squadron. Just by looking at it, you know where they were from, what bomb group, and so forth and so on.
Now, what was the significance of the red on the tail and the wings.
There's nothing, it's just identification of it really. As soon as you look at it, you
So other planes in your unit were painted the same way?
Absolutely, every one of us did the same way. Yeah. And each group was the same way, every group, every plane was painted the same way.
Now, you said your last mission was January 17th, 45.
Right.
Were you discharged shortly after?
No, from there, the rumor was that we were gonna go back to the United States and checked out on the B-29 and over to Japan, over the Pacific. That's what we were afraid was gonna happen to us. Thank God it didn't happen. When I got over here, it was a wonderful reception in Atlantic City. The Air Force took over a lot of those hotels down there, those luxury hotels, and they put the whole cruise up there for 1 week. I stayed at the Radisson Hotel there, and what a setup, it was just fantastic. They just could not do enough for us. They had great dinners and so forth. Well, what was I going to say about that? Lost my train of thought. We were just there a week, I know, and took a physical examination, which I found out at the time that I had a large heart. And when I go to a movie or something, and we were silent for a couple hours, and I went to get up, and I was, oh God, it's just like somebody hit me in the chest or with a knife. But it really hurt for just a few, maybe 15 seconds or so. I don't know what the heck's going on there. Well, come to find out, they said it was from all the oxygen and made my heart enlarge. Because we were on oxygen for like 6 hours or 8 hours of pure 100% oxygen. And the doctor said that happened to some fellows that did their heart enlarge, but he said fortunately it'll go away. And it did. I only had it a few months and it was gone. Later, my heart right now is in excellent shape. Thank God it didn't have any lasting effect. But I was put in the Air Transport Command. That was my next assignment. And specifically, what I was going to do, not fly big transport planes around, but to fly fighter planes from the U.S. to Russia. We furnished Russia with a lot of fighter planes in World War II. And I went out to Great Falls, Montana, Gore Field. And I had to check out in P-51, P-47, P-63 fighter plane. And that was what I was going to fly them from Great Falls to Alaska, then over to Russia. I didn't know anything more from there. But fortunately, the war ended when I was from Great Falls. They sent me down to Jackson, Mississippi to check out these, actually learn to fly these street aircraft. And the war ended when I was down there, so they just canceled all orders. We flew back to Great Falls, Montana. And we sat there for 4 or 5 months, I guess, before we got out. At that time, they had a grading system. There's so many points for this and so many points for that. And combat was, you get more and so on and so forth. So I had a lot of points. We just so had to wait because of one of the guys that had more points than you did. But in fact, that's where I learned how to play golf. We had nothing else to do, so we played golf.
So you were discharged from that?
I discharged from Great Falls, Montana, yeah.
Okay.
My last mission had to be my easiest one. It was the only real milk one that I was on. No acquisition at all. No flak, no fighters, no nothing. We had a marshalling there to Paderborn, Germany, which was on the Rhine River. And the last mission, you were allowed to pick the spot in the squadron you'd like to fly. So you'd always take the outside man, so they had a lot of room to maneuver for evasive action of all kind, for whatever reason. And so that was fun. That was fun coming back. I just couldn't wait to get on that ground. I actually kissed the ground. My bit was over. I just sent my family a big, they had V-mails at that time. I never saw a V-mail, so all I put on there was, I'm finished. But my name was sent to my family.
Did you ever encounter any Japs?
Once.
See them?
Yeah, they were just kind of playing with us. They were staying way outside of our formation. I think they were just kind of fooling around. They had so few of them, I guess. And literally, the Germans ran out of pilots. They didn't have pilots or the aircraft. We shot everything up on the ground that they had, and they killed a lot of pilots. And we were very fortunate. The fellows that went over, the first groups of B-17s, boy, they really had us. They used to have, they could have 2/3 of the planes knocked down on top. You have probably heard of the story of the Memphis Belle. That was the first B-17 that actually went through a whole bombing mission, what do you call it? Series. They had to fly 25 missions at that time. They were the first ones to finish that. But they caught hell from the time they hit the European coast. They got their Gaudi fighters and flags. I was only hit one time on Mercersburg, because the only time I was really hit by fighters. We did have a lot of flags. Because the furthest we pushed the Germans back, they condensed more of their flak guns back. So they had more and more flak guns, so we got a hell of a lot of flak. But the fighters did a lot more damage, needless to say.
After you were discharged, did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
Yeah, I did. In fact, I started going back to college again. But my father lost his business in the Depression. And my brother was 3 years older than I was. He was in the Coast Guard. And my dad said, gee, how would you guys like to start a business together? I said, oh, that sounds good. He was in the engraving stationery business. And so my brother and I both, we saved $1,000 while we were in the service. That was a lot of money at that time. We put up $1,000 a piece, and my father threw in the printing press when we were in business. Papers, maybe on Main Street at Florence Avenue. But
A printing business?
that's where it was, yeah. And we went from printing, engraving, and office supply business, and we went into shopping centers. They became very popular in the late 40s. We opened a shopping center on the L.B. Smith Plaza out in South Buffalo. And now we closed our 19th store. We went up to Transit Town Plaza. And we opened another one at Central Park Plaza. And then over the years, we went from office supply stationery into the educational field. A lot of the schools, we used to show at displays and stuff, and said, why don't you fellows get into the educational market? It's not a bad idea.
What was the name of your business?
It was Paul's Teacher's Pet. We sell all kinds of educational supplies to the teacher and to the parent. And we went through those different areas and had a store at Rochester, Syracuse. No, we just had Buffalo and Rochester. My brother and I sold the business to my son. There was one son. He had two sons, but they were in the industry. And he's carried on the business from there. I worked in the business 59 years. I retired on my 80th birthday. I can't handle it anymore.
Did you ever use the 5220 club?
5220.
$20 a week for 52 weeks was kind of unemployment. Joining a veterans organization.
Like I said, I belong to VFW, AMVETS, Catholic War Vets, and now the one I'm very involved in is we have a local chapter of the 8th Air Force Historical Society, which I'm past president of. And I've been most active in that the last 15 years.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
There's only one left, Bernie White's, is in Tampa. I see him once a year.
He was in your crew?
Yeah, he's the only one left.
Mhm.
And there's a couple other fellows that I knew from flying school and stuff. We email one another, and that way. But there's a lot of history there. I don't know how long I'm talking here.
It's okay.
Almost an hour.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
Well, it did affect me in that great naturally. It made me grow up real fast. I don't like most young people are not truly religious, but that made me become much closer to our Almighty. In fact, when I left Buffalo, I was born in the service. There was an old oblate. I was a Catholic, and an old oblate friend of the family, Father Sullivan, he gave me an old statue of Our Lady of Victory. And he says, you keep that with you, and she's going to take care of you. I had that little statue in my flying suit every single mission. And when I started down the bottom of it, Mary, help me out, bless our crew, and I hope we don't kill any innocent people, but just destroy the factories that were making this war go on. And I always think to this day, Mary, for getting me through without any problem.
Still have the little statue?
So I take it with me when I travel. It's not an empty piece, it's just, it reminds me of the Almighty and Third Mother. But yeah, it did make you more serious, of course, when you face those situations from such a young age. You're 18 years old, you've got a crew. I was the youngest one on that crew, they called me junior. And I won't forget, going into the Air Force, I don't know where else I would have gone. They wouldn't have got me into a submarine. If they'd have to have a rifle in my back to get me out of the submarine. At least these things you could get out and walk if you had to. The submarine is not too good. She's down 200 feet. But I met a lot of wonderful people, and it's a great experience. A lot of fellows do say they want to make me a career out of it. And most of them did very well too. One of my best friends, he had another colonel, and they retired with nice pay. I didn't have anything. Retirement. And I came out because I stayed in the reserve until the Korean War came along. And they said, either you got to get inactive or out. I said, I'm out. I said, I've already used my 9 lives. That was it.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Hey, well, I'm sure. I appreciate it. Ask you too. Would you ever do like a group, like our local group here, the 8th Air Force Historical Society, Western New York chapter? We had 100 fellows, we're down to less than 50 now. They've gotten off pretty fast. Would you ever do anything with like a group like that instead of one person, just to have them on record?